Welcome into the Blogger Bowl Week 10 preview. Phil, the prodigal son, has returned. Welcome back to the Blogger Bowl. Corporate Phil, Dan shirt, obviously. Take a look. But we didn't plan this. I got a Tennessee shirt. He's got a Georgia shirt. Phil's got his corporate outfit on, his corporate uniform.
I was gonna wear a shirt and tie, but
you really should have went into it with the suit.
Short and tie.
you work for a startup from home. I don't think you're wearing a suit every day. But Phil, let's catch up with you. How we doing? We missed you the last couple of weeks.
Good, man. I much prefer talking about college football twice a week than working. Because for me, talking about college football doesn't feel like working. But I'm excited to be back today. It's some pretty good games we get to talk about. Notre Dame's featured this week.
It's an epic week to bring you back. Notre Dame featured. Our Vols are in a 1-2 with Georgia going on. This is a really nice week to welcome you back into the fold. We were hoping to get you back for this one, and we got you.
Yeah, no. So I'm just glad to be here. And if I have any just go on spouts of corporate jargon, just stop me and just circle back and.
No, I think we let you go through. Circle back.
Ping me if you need me.
Per my last email.
Dan, how you doing on this fine Thursday?
I'm fantastic. I'm just ready to talk some ball. But before I launch into our first game here, just do want to shout out our esteemed colleague, Mr. Rooney, whose Maction overs and dogs 6-2.
Trust the system. It works.
Trust the system. The midweek Maction. You take the underdogs and you take the over. 6-2, 3-1 each day. The underdogs actually won outright 3 of the games.
Underdogs are 3-1 outright.
3-1 outright. So far. You even got bullied into sprinkling some Central Michigan money line yesterday. So when Rocky Lombardi was declared out, when he had been trending towards playing, and then was last minute, they said nope, he's not. That had to be a pretty nice feeling. So midweek Maction. Matt is on Tuesdays on Brown Bag Bets, where he will be giving out his Maction picks, which I'm assuming we're just going to.
A spoiler alert: if you tune into the show on Tuesday, I'm going to give out picks for Tuesday and Wednesday. Yeah. They're going to be whoever's the underdog, whoever's the over. I will I'll kind of BS some analysis on why you should bet that, but really I'm betting it because the system. It's the system. Trust the system. Trust the process. It works.
Trust the process. And without further ado, if you guys are ready, we can just launch in and get to the games.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. The big one, the game of the century of the week. Number one,
Georgia.
At number 1, Georgia, because Tennessee is number 1 in the college football playoff rankings. Georgia's number 1 in the AP poll. So we're going to put it on the graphic. Number 1 at number 1, a 3:30 CBS game on Saturday. Georgia up to 8.5. It was at 8 earlier in the week. It opened even higher, but it's 8.5 right now. 65.5 is the total. I mean, it is a total, but it is the total.
It's both.
It fits the description very well. So I'm going to start off I'm going to set the stage for this and then save some of my analysis, X's and O-ish type stuff, the tangible stuff. But I love this game from an intangible and tangible standpoint. But I'm going to start with the intangible stuff by saying this. There's only one thing that went wrong for Georgia from 3:30 p.m. last Saturday to right now at this moment. Everything else that happened from then until now has been absolutely perfect for Kirby Smart. The one thing that went wrong is they lost Nolan Smith for the season to a torn pec, which is a big injury, and we'll talk about that later. But everything else about this is just absolutely fucking perfect for Kirby Smart. Here's why. Okay, we talked about it on Tuesday. The Florida game was the perfect situation for Georgia where they won easily but were sloppy enough that he could just yell at them all week. Tennessee, meanwhile, kicked the shit out of Kentucky. Suddenly, Hendon Hooker, he's the Heisman favorite. Tennessee, they're now taking more money than anybody else to win the national championship. And then the college football playoff rankings come out. And Tennessee, who barely beat Pittsburgh in overtime, got a questionable but probably correct pass interference and then botched end-of-game situation from Alabama to eke out that win at home, who hasn't been good in a million years. They're very good right now, but haven't been good in a million years, are number 1 in the country. And Georgia, who has lost one game over the past 2 seasons, and that one loss they avenged to win the national championship. They are number 3. If he learned anything from Nick Saban, it's about psychological warfare. And I don't mean psychological warfare against your opponent. I mean psychological warfare with your own players.
Oh, yeah.
Because if I'm Kirby Smart, I'm putting two things up on the walls everywhere in the Georgia facility this week. I'm plastering the college football playoff rankings everywhere.
The Shane Beamer piss chart?
Exactly. I'm going to put that next. Yeah, you have their hydration chart, yes. But I'm going to put the college football playoff rankings, and then I'm going to put this graphic that I'm going to share because I love I think 24/7 Sports is by far like the best college sports media company on the planet, without question. But I gotta lose the logo here. But they made this graphic, and it is absolutely amazing to me. They're trying to sell this idea. I apologize for the format.
That's okay.
That Tennessee is just the comparison for the 2019 LSU team. And if I'm Kirby Smart, I'm putting this up all over my facilities as well. Because it doesn't matter. Like, there aren't a ton of people out there who are making this comparison, even if a media company is, and like, I understand it. But it's like, we talk about the psychological warfare. Everything I just explained, you can just explain with logic, but that's not how college football people work. So Kirby Smart has a ton of things to use as motivation for a game where they don't need the motivation to begin with. It's number one versus number one. It's the first top 5 battle in Athens since 1983 or 1983. And it's the first time, if we're using the AP rankings, either one of these teams has played number 1 versus number 2 in the regular season. It's going to be phenomenal. Phil, you haven't been here for a couple of weeks. We've missed you, so we'll let you start us off. What are your expectations for what's going down between the hedges
with our Vols?
With our Vols. So I'm in an emotional pickle. You can imagine. So my head as you can imagine, is not as you can imagine, but Dan, I am a big believer in all this like psychological warfare. Also, have you been there before? Have you done it before on this big of a stage when the expectations are super high? Like, I don't think that Tennessee is going to be able to pull this one off for all those reasons. I think Georgia is going to come with an awesome game plan. I love Kirby Smart with some time to prep for this game. That being said, I think I'm gonna go outright with the Vols, simply because Matt and I went outright with the Vols against Alabama.
They're our Vols.
We're gonna stick with our Vols, and you just got to do it again. So I'm doing that. The one thing which I'm, curious if George is going to do. This is a huge strategic move, but they may want to cover Jalen Hyatt.
I don't know. I think if you just let him run straight, you might as well leave him open.
If you're taking Tennessee outright, you probably don't want them to cover Jalen Hyatt. But I get what you mean.
I know. I hopefully Kirby Smart's not listening to this, because it's clear in.
I think he is. He's the one.
Yeah, he's checking in from his again. I always say Kirby Smart looks like, if he was not a college football coach, he'd be like a great manager at a Radio Shack. He just has that vibe to him.
I think so too. Yeah.
Right. But it's like it's just shocking. I mean, he scored 5 touchdowns against Alabama, and again, he is a great wide receiver. Hooker is a great quarterback. A lot of his routes were just like go routes that there's like, we're just gonna not cover him, and it's happened just a wild amount of times this year. So the fact that Georgia's missing their number 1 linebacker, that is a big miss. It's one of the top players in college football, and losing a vocal leader on your defense, that is also huge from a communication standpoint, going against an up-tempo offense. So the one stat that I've always looked at with Tennessee is they're one of the fastest. They have similar probably to that LSU offense, is the only comparison I'll do, is their time per play is always top in the country on a weekly basis. And so when you're losing a top linebacker who communication in an up-tempo offense is critical, otherwise you get stuck in base level defenses, which allow those busts to happen. So if Tennessee is moving quickly and Georgia's having slight communication issues or some coverage issues early on, that's going to be a huge indicator for me the rest of the game goes. Because as the game goes, as the game picks up speed, that's going to happen. Where I think Georgia's going to be looking to play more of a tempo control type of game here. So again, head is saying Georgia, heart and money is going with Tennessee, because I'd curse myself if I bet against them. And I don't like Tennessee enough to emotional hedge it. So we'll get to emotional hedges later.
I think that's a tease. I know where you're getting with that. I think that communication issue, or maybe what potentially
Miami. Sorry.
I think the potential communication issue is something to note. And Dan, I think what you said about Georgia, everything going right for them from 3:30 on, is correct. I think it's spot on. I think you could also say, we touched on this a little bit on Tuesday, I think everything from about 6 p.m. or 5, whenever it was 6 p.m. on for Tennessee has gone about right for them as well, and how they want to approach this game. Because if you are the obviously 8-point underdog, they are number one, but still, people heavily favor Georgia, lean towards Georgia winning this game. You're going on the road. You have to have the same swagger, the same confidence. You have to have zero doubt in your mind that you are the better football team. Even if you're not, we talked about Georgia's the better football team. But if you're Tennessee, you have to believe that you are the better football team. You have to have confidence. You have to have swagger. You can't go in cocky, which I don't think they will, because they didn't go into the Alabama game that way at all. But you have to be firing on all cylinders. You have to go out and leave no doubt against Kentucky, against a stout defensive front and a team that runs the ball well. Obviously, a very, very light version of Georgia, but kind of a team that's going to try and play a similar game plan. You have to leave no doubt with a 44-6 type win. You have to be number one. You have to have this Heisman quarterback and believe that you have a Heisman quarterback. You have to have a receiver in Jalen Hyatt who you think can go run past any defensive back in the country. So while I think you're absolutely spot on with how everything is played into Kirby Smart's hands, I think everything from a mentality and approach standpoint is played into Josh Heupel and Tennessee's hands too.
So looking at it from the tangible things that I wanted to talk about, this is an interesting game because Georgia's offense is not explosive at all. They're actually, I had it written down somewhere, they're last, I believe, in the country in passing play explosiveness, but they're also top 5 in success rate. So Georgia is just so good at moving the chains, particularly on standard downs. So, 1st and 10, 2nd and 7, 3rd and 4 or less, like they keep the chains moving. They do not want to get in 3rd, 2nd and long, 3rd and long situations. And Tennessee, to their credit, their defense has been really good against the run all year. It'll be interesting to see if they can be good against the run as they were against Kentucky on Saturday. Georgia has only had one possession enter the red zone where they haven't scored points this year, but Tennessee actually has a higher red zone touchdown percentage. You cannot, I know Georgia's defense is very good. You cannot bring field goals to a gunfight in this situation. If you're Kirby Smart, if you're Stetson Bennett, you have to finish drives. I've talked about Tennessee. I've talked about their quality possession defense. They give up a ton of quality possessions, but they're very good at keeping teams from scoring on those drives. But think about it this way, okay? So in the LSU game on the road, LSU fumbled that opening kickoff and then Tennessee scored. Their next 5 drives, 3 turnovers on down, a punt after a 3rd down sack, move them out of the outside the 40, and then a touchdown. So LSU was able to move the ball, weren't able to finish drives. 9 of Pittsburgh's first 12 drives against Tennessee were quality drives. They scored 27 points. Like it's what it's going to come down to. Can Georgia finish drives on offense? They're going to have to do that, and they're going to have to finish drives with touchdowns, because I do think that everything is set up for Georgia to win this game and play well. And I'll because I've got a lot of picks today. I talked about it on Tuesday. Georgia minus the 8 is on my card, but they have to be able to finish those drives if they are going to win this game. The other side of the ball, this is really going to be the first time where Tennessee's going to have to deal with adversity and crowd noise and those kinds of things. Like, with all due respect to Pittsburgh, like they didn't even handle that particularly well. This is a different environment, and LSU never gave their fans a chance to really make an impact in that game. Tennessee's tempo is interesting because it's not just every single play. They will slow it down a touch, not a ton, but they use motion. They what they try to do is, it's a lot of, interestingly enough, it's like, I was thinking it's kind of, in a sense, it's like playing an option team on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, where you have to be fundamentally sound because they're going to just do things that not a lot of other teams do. The wide splits, the way they stack their receivers. It's a very different kind of offense, but they use the motion and that kind of thing to really get the looks that they want. And if it's loud, if they can't hear each other, if they can't communicate well on offense, it's going to make things a little bit tricky, and they might have to slow down a little bit. Like, they might not be able to go as fast as they want. I don't think that Nolan Smith, in terms of on the field, in terms of being able to make tackles and that kind of thing, is a big deal for Georgia from the standpoint of, like, they don't rush the quarterback very well. They just like to sit back and play coverage, and they know that their guys can cover, and they don't give up a ton of big plays. But I do think the communication, like we mentioned earlier, the communication, the leadership, you need to be able to communicate on defense against this Tennessee offense. And that's what Kentucky just didn't do that. And like Alabama struggled with that as well. We joke like, hey, you need to cover Jalen Hyatt, and give the credit to Tennessee as they put an immense amount of stress on opposing defenses. And Kirby Smart, like this is an unbelievable coaching matchup. Like Josh Heupel in that offense against Kirby Smart in that defense, like there might not be better good on good in college football right now. There might not be. Like you can make arguments for a couple of other guys, sure. But like you can make the argument that this is best offensive play caller and best defensive play caller in the country. And I know someone else is actually calling plays for Georgia, but you know what I mean? So like it's going to be it's just going to be fascinating to watch. And I just think that less so the emotion and all the mind games, like I kind of joke about that stuff, but I do think like we saw how much the crowd impacted Tennessee and helped them win against Alabama. I think they're going to be on the ass end of that in this game on Saturday.
Think you have a pretty good point there. I mean, the one knock you have on Tennessee is similar to what we had against on UCLA when they went into that Oregon game. They haven't really been super tested in a tough road spot. They were tested at Pitt early, but they weren't. I think they're a different team now than they were then, but still didn't really play well in that and kind of survived overtime against the backup Pitt quarterback. So that is that's going to be the main factor for them, I think, trying to have to get over.
All right, moving on to our next big game of the week. Leg Show Magazine says hello, Leg Show Magazine. Good to see you again, and thanks for watching as always. Our next big game, we're going to stay in the SEC, is number 6 Alabama visits number 10 LSU, 7 p.m. Alabama, a 13.5-point favorite. The total is 56.5. And before we break down the game, I just want to point out, I'm not going to sit here and talk about who should be ranked where, like whatever. It's all stupid, but it is absolutely hilarious that LSU is ranked 10th simply because it will give Alabama a data point so that the committee can just move them up when they win this game. Nevertheless, Alabama 6th, LSU number 10, Alabama almost a full. Bill, your guy Brian Kelly welcoming Alabama into Baton Rouge. What do you expect to happen?
I expect a beatdown. Just to put it lightly. Again, I think LSU has improved a lot, but I've seen Brian Kelly against Nick Saban a couple of times. I've seen how that has gone.
Hasn't gone well.
Hasn't gone well. Hasn't been fun. And so, LSU is playing a lot better. But at the same time, Alabama, when Saban's back is against the wall and he knows he needs a big win in a big moment, and he's been gifted a top 10 matchup, he's going to perform. And that's really all I have to say about it. It's like you just trust data points of like Nick Saban going into big games in a big week when he needs a big win, needs a little bit of like showtime to go along with it. Like I think he's going to put up a lot of points, and it's going to be, if it was an afternoon game, it would be even a bigger beatdown. I think if it was an afternoon game, we'd be looking at like a 56-20 type game, personally. But I think when you're looking at this at night game, I think that impact it'll be an awesome environment. That game will be great. The first quarter will be close. And then Alabama will force some Jaden Daniels turnovers. Like they're going to be aggressive. Again, I think Will Anderson's going to be the difference in this one with a big play. And then Alabama's just going to roll late. Not even late, like going into the second half and then to start the third and fourth quarter, just going to roll. Where I think LSU will come out hot. They'll make a couple big plays. It'll be like a 7-7 game or like a 10-7 game, like midway through the second quarter. And I think Alabama just blows the doors off of it.
It's going to come down to the ability for Alabama to make Jaden Daniels uncomfortable. And I think in this little run, like Jaden Daniels hasn't really been made too uncomfortable, and he's played really well, but has kind of been able to do whatever he wants. And maybe that's a cop-out answer, a cop-out breakdown for me. If, spoiler, if the Alabama team can pressure a quarterback, the quarterback's not going to play well. But I truly think it's going to come down to how effective Will Anderson can be, how effective that Alabama front seven can be. If they get after Jalen Daniels, I think it's going to be a long night for LSU. But I mean, I'm with Phil. I think Alabama wins this game by a couple of scores, but also Alabama hasn't been all that impressive on the road. Really, the last couple years, like for whatever reason, they've struggled away from home in these big spots. Now you talk about Kirby Smart having reason to motivate his team. I'm sure Nick Saban, even though they have a loss, he's probably telling his team, "You lost on a last-second field. We beat ourselves against the number one team in the nation on the road, and they think you're number 6. Let's go prove them otherwise." Whatever. I'm sure he's probably finding a way to spin a narrative here. I think Alabama is a lot better than LSU. I don't think LSU deserves to be anywhere near 10, but at the same time, Bama just, for whatever reason, on the road the last couple of years has not been the same Bama that we've kind of known them to be.
Yeah.
That said, he does own Brian Kelly.
He owns Brian Kelly, and if you look back, you look back at LSU's record this year and who they've played and how they've played in those moments. it's just a farce, the fact that they're ranked number 10 right now. It's like, okay, they lost to Florida State. They beat Mississippi State, squeaked by Auburn. Solid team, good team, best team in the country they played, got smoked by Tennessee. Florida eked one out, beat Ole Miss, who's, again, was ranked 7. Everyone with eyeballs knew they weren't the number 7 team in the country. So it's like, I think this
it's almost like Ole Miss is 11 to justify having LSU at 10.
It's a bit wild. So like, I think their rating is very bloated based on how we've seen them play this year. Like, they've played better, but have we ever looked at them and been like, this is a top 10 team who's going to like compete with the best dogs in the SEC this year? No. And so like, I think this is going to go very similar to how it went versus Tennessee, but I think you're going to get a vengeful Saban, which is a scary, scary man.
So no Alabama is coming off of a bye week. Did I say Tennessee?
I think both teams are coming off a bye, right?
I'm talking specifically about, I believe that is, yes, they are, but I'm talking specifically about Alabama here because at Texas, 15 penalties for 100 yards. At Arkansas, 10 penalties for 101 yards. At Tennessee, 17 penalties for 130 yards. So I'm sure it's been something that Nick Saban has tried to drill down over the last couple of weeks. I get where you guys are coming from with LSU, and I'll talk about them in a second. But like, to me, this is about Alabama proving that they have composure on the road, which is something that they have not shown the capability to do yet this season. And again, something to work on. I'm sure, like I said, it's been drilled down to a fine point this week, but that is something to keep an eye on. LSU is 69th in the country in EPA per rush defense, 70th in defensive rushing success rate, which means playing on the road in a hostile environment, this could be an opportunity for Alabama to lean on Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit. But if you're in 1st and 15 because you're committing false start penalties, and that's the thing, is like a lot of the penalties against Tennessee and Texas, I don't remember the Arkansas game, but I do remember Tennessee and Texas very vividly. Those were procedure penalties, a lot of them. It was offsides, it was false starts. If you're in 1st and 15, 2nd and 10 because you're committing false starts, it's going to be hard to lean on your run game. The other thing, we know Alabama's defensive question marks. LSU's offense the last 2 games, Daniels had 349 passing yards against Florida, 385 total yards against Ole Miss. It's a question of, was that a mirage? Because we know the Florida defense isn't very good. We've seen that time and time again this year. The Ole Miss defense we don't think is very good. We don't know. Like, they've kind of come back to earth a bit this year. It's a little bit the quarterback who can run narrative with Saban defenses is a tad bit overrated. And what's a little bit underrated is if you look at when his teams lose, a lot of the times it's because there's a receiver on the other side that they have a hard time covering. They had a hard time covering Xavier Worthy against Texas before the Ewers injury. Jalen Hyatt obviously had a massive game, but even Evan Stewart at Texas A&M had sort of a revelatory moment against the Alabama secondary. Keyshawn Butte is the kind of guy who can really put pressure on the Alabama secondary. So I look at a lot of this stuff and I'm like, man, that is a lot of points to be laying. I'm not going to take a side on this because I do kind of understand where you guys are coming from with the whole perspective of LSU might be just a mirage. Brian Kelly's a good coach, though. Maybe that Tennessee game was a galvanizing moment for him, and they kind of came together as a team afterwards and said, hey, we have to get our shit together and play better, because they have. Like, you can't deny at the very least that they have looked a hell of a lot better since they got embarrassed. So there's a lot of things about this game that I find interesting. Also, night game in Death Valley, again, kind of a dicey scenario. It is a lot of points. I'm staying away from it, but man, there's a lot that makes me kind of question what's going on and whether or not Alabama's really going to be able to put forth a performance where they're going to cover 2 touchdowns here. But again, another big moment for this Alabama team. And I'm just going to throw this out there because I don't really want to talk a ton about the Heisman Trophy, but DraftKings had Bryce Young 30-1 this week to win the Heisman Trophy. And I think that right now, the list of guys that can win the award in no particular order are Hendon Hooker, CJ Stroud, Caleb Williams, and Bryce Young. I think that's your list. Like, if Drake May can run the table and beat an undefeated Clemson team, he could maybe get in the conversation. Maybe Blake Corum if Michigan beats Ohio State, possibly, because we know like their voters are trying to give them Michigan players the Heisman Trophy. Like, Aiden Hutchinson wasn't better than Will Anderson last year, and he got more votes. But nevertheless, my point is this is a big time moment potentially for Bryce Young, and on the road in a hostile environment, if he puts up big numbers, like, he's that guy, and it might just simply be Bryce Young is really good.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's good value, but to take a look at. And the last thing I got on this, you talked about the procedure penalties. You talked about Alabama's kind of penalty discipline issue so far this season. If they've had the bye week and still kind of can't shake that on the road, I think that's when I'm finally kind of worried about this team and whether or not Saban fully has control on them, whether they're capable enough of shaking those issues. But if they, took time to, 2 weeks, get work on those issues, get rid of them, I will go back to feeling very, very, very confident about this Alabama team, because really the thing that's been beating them so far this year is themselves. And I say beating them, they've lost one game on the road on a last second field goal in a game that, they mishandled the end, but like they beat themselves in that game too. You could say, you look at the penalty, if you cut your penalties in half, you win that game. If you cut your penalties in half against Texas, you probably win that game by 10. Like they've been their own worst enemy so far this year.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. And my last point before we move on to the next game is kind of funny how much we grade Alabama on a curve, because it's like, oh, well, they didn't do this very well at all in this game and they've looked bad. And it's like, yeah, they have one loss and they probably should have won the game that they lost. Yeah. They should have lost to Texas. Moving on to our last of the big games of the weekend. I will go first on this one and just lay out and let you guys go. Sure. But we have number 4 Clemson at Notre Dame, a 7:30 p.m. game on NBC and the Peacock app. I don't know why. Peacock, if you want to sponsor us, do it. I don't know what's going on. Clemson's a 3.5-point favorite, and the total's 44.5. So I have 2 thoughts on this game. One's just kind of an overarching non-football-y thing, and then I have the only thing about this game that I kind of noticed. One, we've talked about how the Marcus Freeman era was going to be like transformative for Notre Dame, and how it was going to be like ushering in this era of Notre Dame likability, which has never been a thing in the history of college football. Like, everyone hates Notre Dame. We know it. Honestly, even like, I'm not buttering you guys up, I'm more or less neutral in Notre Dame. I don't really care. Like, I'm old enough to vaguely remember them being like Notre Dame in the late 80s, early 90s. I don't really care. Nevertheless, this year it hasn't really played out that way. They had the Marshall loss, whatever. They've just kind of been there. Like, they're playing decent football now. Like, they've got their ups and their downs. They do some things well. They do some things not well. Whatever. But is this like the biggest opportunity for them to usher in the era of Notre Dame likability of our lifetime if they can beat Clemson and get Clemson out of the playoff conversation? Because I will say this about Clemson. They're a fine football team. They would lose pretty handily to Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and I think Michigan would beat them by a touchdown. I think Michigan would beat them by 7 to 10 points. And Clemson being number 4, if they run the table, they're going to be in the playoff. The committee's not going to leave out an undefeated Power 5 team unless it's TCU. They're not going to leave out an undefeated Clemson. So that's
TCU was trailing in a couple games, so we can't have them
exactly.
in the top
TCU
4.
was trailing. We can't put them in the top 5. But so my one thing about this game in general is, can Notre Dame, I've talked about it in the Georgia-Tennessee game, finishing drives. Notre Dame is 26th in quality possessions, but they're 120th in points per quality possession. They're 50th in red zone touchdown percentage, where Clemson is 21st with about a 6% edge in finishing drives with touchdowns. So it's like, it's every Clemson game that's closest, they just do the little things within the margin and then get a little bit of home cooking officiating, which hopefully they won't get in this game. But it just kind of feels like I'm just
ACC officials, they probably will.
Notre Dame hanging around and kicking too many field goals and Clemson pulling some bullshit out and winning the game the last minute, or winning by less than 7. So I don't know. I have no other thoughts. I'm going to let the 2 Notre Dame fans take the rest of this conversation.
I will say, you talked about kicking too many field goals there. Marcus Freeman has not, and then if you get into 4th and 7, 4th and 8, 4th and 9, obviously you usually kick the field goal, but he's been pretty good at taking chances on 4th and short and trying to give his offense a chance to make a play. I think he understands the difference between the touchdown and field goal, obviously 7 points, but in terms of momentum and just on the scoreboard, touchdowns are a lot more important now. But yeah, this is kind of Notre Dame's chance to really stamp home the likability of the Freeman era. Don't need the ness. It's their chance to get the country on their side a little bit more, even after the momentum they built in the offseason. But this is going to probably come down to which DJ we get. If we get the really good one, if we get the really efficient one, Notre Dame's going to have a tough time. And I think if you get the really good and efficient DJ, a lot of teams are going to have a tough time with Clemson, because they take care of the football. They can run the football really well, and they can stop the run. And it's going to come down to that. And then offensively, I mean, Notre Dame's going to have to be able to run the football. If they can't run the football, they're not going to score many points. And you should probably look at a Notre Dame team total under. They have to take care of it. They have to be able to run it. Clemson knows they're going to run it, and Notre Dame has to win those battles in the trenches. And being at home should in theory be helpful, but they've been crap at home this year and they've been great on the road. So I almost wish they were on the road in this one. But that's what it's going to come down to, is which DJ shows up and if Notre Dame can run the football effectively.
And also, I mean, you made a good point with the ACC refs. Like that's a real thing. It's like,
it is.
It's a very real thing. You look at Notre Dame's game last week versus Syracuse. Like Syracuse. It was brutal. So Syracuse is one of the most penalized teams in the country. Went without a penalty into the fourth quarter. Notre Dame had 5 in the first half, and there was like a bunch of 5 in the first quarter, and there were just like blatant miscalls. And even the
screenshot of the Syracuse player lined up offsides. Right before the snap, the helmet was like across the football, and he was still in a 3-point stance.
He hit the center before the snap. It was crazy. And also, what's more alarming is before the game, the Notre Dame's message boards, one of the main guys, Tim Prister, noted that hey, Dino Babers put in a complaint to the ACC refs because he felt like he got screwed against Clemson. So look for a lot of calls to go Syracuse's way early because the ACC and that's exactly what happened. So it was almost like that. I mean, that's just like, it's brutal. So you wonder after that game, does the ACC be like, all right, we know people actually watch these games. Eyeballs are going to be on this one. Do we maybe not try to do that? That's the hope. But looking at this one, it really comes down to DJ. Which DJ shows up. I mean, he showed up to Notre Dame Stadium in 2020 when Trevor Lawrence went down and set the all-time passing record inside Notre Dame Stadium in his second career start. Going into that game,
so good.
Notre Dame's game plan was we're going to stop Etienne at all costs and make DJ throw it. And all of a sudden, DJ just came out and absolutely like we assumed after that game, we're like, this guy's winning the Heisman next year. He's got 2 more years and he's the number 1 pick in the NFL. Hasn't panned out that way. He's been pretty good this year. Sans first game of the year. Last week he was pretty brutal. And so I don't know if this is a great game for him to get his passing back, simply because it's going to be in the low 40s, a little bit damp, rainy, winds anywhere from 15 to 25 miles an hour. Now it helps that he has an absolute cannon and can cut through that wind. But on the flip side of that, not a good game for Notre Dame to get their passing game right. So I'm looking for Notre Dame
to go. Tell me Drew Pine doesn't have a cannon that can cut through the wind?
He's got a cannon when he tries to throw a screen ball, but throws it 30 miles per hour into the ground. But I think Notre Dame's going to try to. I do think bad conditions can help Notre Dame though, because they want to be able to run the ball and they need to force some turnovers and they want to slow the game down. And so, Matt, I'm going to pass it back to you in a second. But Dan, you made me think of a picture of if Notre Dame wins this game. I'm going to get our guy who does tons of different Photoshops, and I'm going to have him Photoshopping a picture of Marcus Freeman just giving Dabo Swinney a massive wedgie, because I feel like that's what everyone wants to see done. Like Dabo's just the annoying kid that's walking around being like, we're the plucky underdogs, Clemson. It's kind of run its course, to be honest. And the fact that they've won close games when the team has not been this good this year, they have a clear path to the playoff because the ACC stinks. Maybe we'll see with North Carolina if they can beat them. I do like that. We'll talk about that at a later time. But like this would just be like the country just being like, thank God. And it's also because it's not like Notre Dame will win this and get in the playoffs. There's not many stakes for Notre Dame in this game, except it being their like national Super Bowl. This is their biggest game of the year. This is their Super Bowl. If they win this, the Marcus Freeman era, the narrative is completely changed. So Notre Dame, you better believe, is going to bring everything they possibly have in this game. And I've got more to say, but I'll pass to Matt so I don't get too much long-winded here.
I guess my one last thing to say, back to the run game for Notre Dame, but Syracuse started in that game to confuse Drew Pine, give him some tough looks, just started dropping 7 and 8 in the coverage, and Pine couldn't throw against it. I'm interested to see if Clemson decides to take that approach and basically be like, we think our front 4 can just take care of your run game on its own if they're going to load some people up in the box, how they approach Drew Pine, and whether or not Tommy Rees and Drew Pine can come up with something to do that counters that. Because I think if Clemson says, we think our front 4 can stop you and we're going to drop everybody else into coverage, I think Notre Dame's going to be able to run the football a little bit. But that for me is going to be the ultimate key, is what Clemson does defensively and if Notre Dame can run on just kind of their base defense.
Also, a huge thing to look out for here is special teams. So Notre Dame has the number 1 punt block team in the country right now, led by Brian Mason. They've blocked, I think it's
4 games
ridiculous. Maybe 5 in the last 6 games. It's pretty ridiculous and unheard of. And in bad conditions, that is going to have an impact. Also, it's going to have an impact when you have a punt block team that is that good. You have to go in very safe punt protection, which allows you to get more returns. So, if Notre Dame can pin them back, I don't hate Notre Dame not being ultra aggressive if they can punt and pin Clemson back, especially if not good DJs there. Also, if Klubnik plays, he's already on my shit list, guys.
Yeah, you were in the DMs during the Syracuse game, just talking shit about that kid.
Here's why. So on 2 plays, he got like slightly bumped. He got a gentle breeze, knocked him out of bounds, and he threw a 15-yard penalty on a 3rd and 25. He gets up, does a giant first down, yelling at the players' faces. I'm like, dude, you just didn't see any receivers, scrambled for 6 yards, got brushed out of bounds. I mean, is that the perfect Dabo guy right there? I mean, I just saw that, and I'm like, this is everything I hate about Clemson. Granted, he's a freshman. It was a big play. Yeah. I don't really care.
In a massive spot in a big game.
I would have done the same thing, but I like to craft these narratives in my head of why I don't like Clemson. So that's.
I love how you took that as it started like a breakdown sentence. Like, if Cade Klubnik plays, you would think you would go into Notre Dame's gonna have to do this or Clemson's gonna have to do this. If Cade Klubnik plays, I hate that guy. He's on my shit list. You just use that opener as a segue to shitting on.
Quick last statistic here. So Notre Dame has do you know how many times opponents have scored when they've gotten into the red zone against Notre Dame?
Every time.
Every single time, which is crazy. So my hot take for this game is that if Notre Dame's going to get a red zone turnover, and it's going to happen one of 2 ways. Either Klubnik comes in, he tries to hang on to the ball too long and scramble around. He has a faster defensive ends and faster linebackers than he's played against because he's in the ACC. Or if DJ's hanging around, someone tries to sack him, is dragging on his leg because DJ is a beast and hard to bring down, and then someone knocks the ball loose. So, again, this is going to be a game of turnovers and special teams and running the ball. It's going to be a fast game. There's going to be a lot of running the ball from both sides. I'm
very disappointed in my cousin for scheduling her wedding on Saturday.
Oh, you don't go.
Brutal.
I have to. I'm an usher. I have to go.
Usher people out of the church and in front of a TV.
Well, it's a night game, so maybe I could probably find a TV or a phone.
Oh, it's not. The wedding's not during the game.
No, but still the reception is.
Dude, no one's gonna care if you're sitting at like the table.
That's a good point. The wedding is during Georgia, Tennessee, though. So
you got to make sacrifices at a certain point. The last thing I'll say, if you guys are telling me that there's gonna be a lot of running the football in this game, and it's gonna be the weather's not gonna be great, it means we're gonna have a shorter, condensed kind of game, and that definitely favors the team that's better in the red zone, which would appear to be Clemson. So we'll go from there. Our off the radar picks. Phil just gave us his whole Cade Klubnik story. So Matt, why don't you start us off with your game? Under the radar, you are going west.
I am going back west. I'm going to UCLA, Arizona State. I like UCLA. I thought they had a nice bounce back effort last week. They failed their only technically not only road test, but really only road test of the year at Oregon. They just kind of got bullied, and they were able to do some things, but really they got bullied in a tough environment. They didn't really look like they belonged. They didn't really compete too hard. I'm looking to see them bounce back and see how they play on the road in not the most hostile of road environments in Arizona State, but on the road against the Pac-12 team that's played better since their coach has been fired. They're not the rollover team Colorado was when they went to go play there. Just interested to see how UCLA bounces back, because I think that's a team that, despite the tough loss on the road, still controls their own destiny. If they can go win in the Pac-12, I should say, probably not the college football playoff, but if they go win a tough road test here and take care of business and nothing to see here and go get an easy win, I think that puts them right back on track for a meeting with USC for a bid in the Pac-12 championship game. I think I believe in them a lot more. If they go in here, kind of play with their food, escape with a win, but it's not really all that impressive, I think that kind of keeps leading more to they're not who we thought they were when they went into that Oregon game. So just interested to see how UCLA plays and if they pass their next road test after failing the first one at Oregon.
So here's an interesting thing. I have no thought on this.
And it's Pac-12 after dark.
Pac-12 after dark is always fun. No thought on this, but it is something I found kind of interesting. I don't know who's going to be starting at quarterback for Arizona State in this game. Emory Jones has been dealing with an injury, so Trenton Bourguet, I don't know how to pronounce it, has started now a couple of different games for them. He got the win against Washington, and I don't even remember who they played in the last game. Nevertheless, he started 2 games for Arizona State. Western Michigan starting quarterback is his younger brother, Trayson. So we've had brothers starting at different FBS schools this year at quarterback. And I was just curious, I don't know the answer to this, how rare that is for 2 brothers to be starting for different FBS teams over the course of a college football season. I thought that was kind of a neat thing. I tweeted it last night, by the way. It has 5 likes. 3 of them are from members of their family. He clearly, so shout out to Trace in the Western Michigan.
Shout out Trayson for covering last night.
Shout out to Trayson for covering and clearly searching his name on Twitter. Because I didn't tag him. I just wrote his name. He searched for it and he liked it. So that's
nothing wrong with that.
Phil, it's been a few weeks since we've had you on the show. And true to form, if it's an off the radar game, like thank God, starting next week, we're going to be able to put this team on our list of games that we actually have to talk about so that Phil can just find a new wheelhouse other than Illinois football for his off the radar game.
It's have I willed it into existence? Is Illinois?
Some are saying you might have willed it into existence. Some people are saying that.
Well, the thing is with Illinois, they're playing at Michigan. They're playing against Michigan State. I kind of joked Illinois early in the season, and I was just like, I liked watching them because they're just like give like a lot of times like bad average Big Ten football. But this team now is in like, I mean, they can probably going to control their own destiny against Purdue next week. It's going to be a big game for the Big Ten West there. I think it's in the 12th. So that's
next week.
Illinois Purdue too.
I thought next week
next week.
Week 11 is Purdue at Illinois. Week 11.
Yeah. So that's a big game for the Big Ten West. But I mean, like maybe it's an ode to Illinois and how they're playing, but I think it's probably just to how bad the rest of the Big Ten has been. But like they've handily beaten Wisconsin. I mean, I guess not handily, but it's like they beat Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska. So it's like Illinois has
3 of those 4 were handily.
Yeah, and
then the Iowa game was their backup quarterback who didn't complete a pass.
True. And like if you think about it, like early in the season, my thought was Illinois can really put themselves into the second tier of the Big Ten, not the elite teams, but the solid teams, the Wisconsins of the past 10 years. And that's a great place for Illinois to be. And it's a fun place for Illinois to be. And hopefully the rest of the Big Ten can get their shit together and start playing a little bit better football. But Illinois is dragging their weight right now. So this game,
if only they didn't lose to Indiana.
If only they didn't lose to Indiana, they'd be
a top 10 team.
They'd be a top 10 team.
LSU would be 10.
LSU would still be 10.
LSU would be 10.
Matt, how many points per game do you think Illinois has given up this year?
It's got to be like right around 10.
8.5.
Jeez.
8.5. So and again, they're going against the boisterous offense of Michigan State. So I think they win this game handily, but it's just a fun storyline to think that, again, in the last year of the split conference championship game, we're going to potentially get Illinois versus, Ohio State or Michigan, which won't be a terrible game. It won't be a good game. But it won't be absolutely brutal terrible.
It might be absolute. It might be Iowa. It might be Iowa versus Ohio State, which is, hey, look, this game should be a blowout, and then it's not until the fourth quarter when Ohio State is a lot better. I talked about it preseason. I called Illinois a landmine team, and it was, if you prepare for them, if you're ready for them, you can avoid them, and you'll be fine. If you're not prepared for them, you're going to step on them, and they're going to blow up your season. I was wrong about that. They play exceptionally good defense. They run the ball very well, and they don't turn the ball over in the passing game. Tommy DeVito he's only thrown for over 250 yards against an FBS team once. That was against Minnesota. He also hasn't thrown an interception since September 10th against Virginia. So, if he just makes the handful of throws they're going to have him make every game, and Chase Brown, Chase Brown does what he does, I think he still leads the country in carries. They're going to be tough to beat. They can beat anybody on their schedule outside of Michigan, outside of Ohio State. Unlikely to beat either of those teams. When they play Michigan, my analysis of that game is going to be these are like Spider-Man meme. Michigan's got more talent. That's what it is. It's both teams play great defense. Both teams run the ball. Both
JV versus
quarterbacks do a lot. It is what it is.
Did you ever see D3, Phil?
What? Oh, yeah.
Did you ever see D3? JV beat the varsity at the end. Spoiler.
Man, I was going to watch that movie tonight. No, I wasn't. I'm going to watch Trading Places, which we were. And I was going to say we're going to watch Trading Places. That actually was an unintentional segue into my game to bring us back to a game that I find endlessly fascinating. James Madison on the road at Louisville. We have Louisville playing a non-conference game in the early schedule in November. So they played 2 of their first 3 games were conference games. So they had to, and they end the season with Kentucky every year. So they had to find time to play another non-conference game. They scheduled James Madison. And I don't know what their athletic director was doing scheduling James Madison between Wake Forest and Clemson, but that's where this game falls on their schedule. Again, we talked about it when they did, it was my under the radar game when they played App State, like these measuring stick games for James Madison, where they are. Like, obviously, there's going to be a bit of a talent discrepancy in this game, but it's still a measuring stick game for them. They were off last week, I believe. And now they're playing a Louisville team who's coming off a massive win against Wake Forest for them. Louisville laid an egg against Syracuse in their season opener when they turned the ball over a million times. Since then, they've lost 2 games by a combined 5 points. They lost to Boston College, which was not a great loss, but Malik Cunningham got hurt at the end of the game and wasn't in the game, so they needed their backup quarterback to make plays, and they couldn't. So they've won 3 in a row. They seem to have some momentum. So the question is, though, how up for this game are they going to be when they're playing Clemson next week off of the Wake Forest game? This one is on my card, or not. This one is the provisional game on my card, and I will say this. We don't know who's playing quarterback yet for James Madison. Todd Centeio has been hurt. I think he's missed the last 2 games where he got hurt in the middle of one game and then played in the last game. And they played the world beaters at Marshall. So, like, hey, we're not going to dog Marshall. And Marshall's defense has actually been, like, exceptional against everybody this year. But their backup quarterback is not good. So if it's a backup quarterback on the road against Louisville, I'm not liking them. But I will save it for my card. But, yeah, I mean, this game, to me, just one of those, like, weird schedule spots. If Todd Centeio plays, this is not a great idea for Louisville to be playing this game.
It's just, I said after last week, I'm just completely done ever touching a Louisville game because I never know which team's going to show up. It's whether it's going to be the team that can't beat Boston College with a healthy Malik Cunningham or the team that beats Wake Forest 48-10.
Shout out the UConn Huskies for putting a beat down on the BC Eagles this weekend. How about that?
Well, it's all about
somebody, if somebody didn't get a real job and could be here on Tuesdays, I shouted out the potentially bowl eligible UConn Huskies.
Pretty selfish of you, Phil.
Huskies.
It was pretty selfish of you to get a job, Phil.
Yeah, pretty selfish of you to get a job and try and provide for your family.
I shout out. I joined Team X Blade. Sorry, guys. Brink reference.
You kind of look like it.
All right, so
cards.
Let's see. How many do I have? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the provisional. I have 5.5 picks, a teaser, and a parlay. So I've got a bunch. Phil, how many do you have in your card?
I have 1, 2. Oh, my bets just went away for 1 second. 1, 2.
While he's counting, Matt, how many do you have?
I've got 5.
Lot.
He's got 5. Matt, you've got a lot.
Yeah. Well, not as many as I had week 1. But I got a good amount on here. I thought I was only going to have 3 or 4, and then I scroll through FanDuel's odds again, and they make those too easy to just let me see the numbers. They should make it more difficult for me to see the numbers because I see them. I just keep adding games to my card.
Since you've expanded your card, you might have this on there. I will tease mine. I'll go last. I will tease mine and say I have a pick on my card that I am almost willing to guarantee Matt will bet if it's not on his card already. But Matt,
it's a tease. I like it. TCU laying 8.5 at Tech or against Texas Tech at home. I think this is a game for them where talk about teams with motivation in Georgia. I think this is will be a motivated TCU team who survived a scare at West Virginia, but now gets to come back at home. And I think surviving that scare gives them even a little bit more motivation. Like, hey, you guys need to play better. You can't overlook a team like Texas Tech. I think they're going to put up a lot of points at home, win that game. This game scares me a little bit. But I like Kentucky -1.5 at Mizzou. I think Kentucky's a much better football team. I know it's a little bit of a letdown spot, and I think maybe Vegas wants me to take Kentucky, but I'm going to take the bait. North Carolina -7.5 at Virginia. No idea how Virginia's going to score with North Carolina. Even North Carolina's defense is not good, but they've been getting a little bit better, and Virginia's offense is not good at all whatsoever. Tennessee +8.5. That's principal play. Kansas State +2.5 against Texas. Auburn +12.5 at Mississippi State. We're talking about the fired coach bounce back. I like that there. They actually played okay at some spots this year, so let's take them getting almost 2 touchdowns. Florida State for Phil -7.5 against Miami in that rivalry game. I think Miami sucks, And I think this game has, like Dan and I talked about Tuesday, the potential to be one of those weird rivalry games that is closer than it should be. But I'm doing this for Phil. And then West Virginia plus 7.5 at Iowa State.
Love it.
My bet that I think you're going to make once I talk about it is you did not have on your cards.
Oh, damn.
I'm already ready to type.
Just setting tell you. So I have, first off, our Vols plus 8.5. I have Matt also have North Carolina, Virginia. I looked at that line at minus 7.5, and I was like, what the heck?
Again, it's a line. It scares me. Like, does Vegas want me to take Carolina?
Well, they also wanted me to take that line. It had given 7.5 against Georgia State, and that didn't pan out for me either back when. So it's like a double reverse trap game. But I think Drake May and the offense gets it together. Their defense is miserable, but just like look at Virginia. I mean, it's like
Virginia's offense is more miserable.
It's really bad. So
it's the resistible force versus the movable object.
I have the I have the most money on that game. I'm doing the emotional hedge, getting Clemson minus 3.5. I think if Notre Dame does find a way to win this game, it's going to be by 1 point, 2 points, or 3 points. I don't think they win by more than a field goal if they somehow scrape this one out. Also, I'm tempted to go under on that game because of the conditions, but you never know. DJ could just come out and start slinging the ball around. You never know. Also, if it's a sloppy game, you don't know if there's going to be long runs and weird
turnovers.
Like that. Then I have Cal USC. Cal's getting 21.5. I actually don't hate Cal's defense. I don't like Cal, but I don't hate their defense. And I feel like USC is just, I can't figure them out yet. So I don't know.
They're going through the motions a little.
Oh, I've got USC figured out. Their offense is awesome and their defense sucks.
Yeah, and so it's like if Ott can run the ball against USC, I think this one can be close. So it's like if Cal's running the ball solidly, then this 21.5 seems like a pretty easy one to me. But it could be a situation where Cal comes out and they just try to, like, Jack Plummer tries to throw the ball a bunch and it's just a weird game and they don't hand it to Ott a bunch. I don't know. It seems like Cal's going to try to go really slowly and just ground and pound the ball. So we'll see. So that's what we got for my card outside of my prize pick. Whatever money is on Holy Cross, haven't mentioned them yet. 52 minutes in, big of me. Number 5 in the country right now. Game of the week last week in FCS on a walk-off double reverse Philly special where he just decided to run it in the end zone to go up 52-51 against Fordham. Just thought I'd mention that. Can't bet Holy Cross yet, but if you can, take whatever points you're getting playing a bad Lehigh team against former Holy Cross head coach Tom Gilmore, who coached me for 4 years.
Oh, how about that?
Are you torn at all in that game
then? Probably.
My card, I already talked about it. Georgia minus 8. James Madison is the provisional. I will take 7.5 if Todd Centeio plays. So keep your eye on that. If they announce he's playing, take James Madison there. I am with Matt. I got a 13 on Auburn with the dead cat bounce. I like that situation. Cadillac Williams is their interim coach. Auburn
I
legend.
Love that. Makes me feel old, but I love that.
Definitely makes you feel old, but you feel like they're going to have some motivation and try to play for him. Like the dead cat bounce scenario there. I also am on Kansas State plus 2.5. Don't want to derail this too much, but for the life of me, I can't figure out why a coach who's 1-6 in his career in road games, a quarterback who was absolutely horrific in his first true road game 2 weeks ago and has played 2 really bad games since, are on the road, are supposed to be a favorite against a Kansas State team that is playing really, really good football and is really, really well coached. Don't understand it at all. I know the metrics love Texas. I don't know what you've seen from them. They should have lost the Iowa State game, found a way to win it. But like at the end of the game, Iowa State kind of lost that game as much as Texas won it. And then the Oklahoma State game was every other loss they've had under, I almost said Tom Herman. Wow. Steve Sarkisian on the road. So I'll take Kansas State there. And then, tomorrow night, do you guys know what an atmospheric river is?
No, is it a river?
I have no idea what it is. I looked it up to try to
Is this the bet you've been teasing?
No. Oh. But I don't
know.
What
atmospheric river sounds like something that would affect my bet.
Yeah, man. You just say that word and Matt bets no matter what it is.
It's an atmospheric river game?
I looked for it to try to find out what it means. No, it's a meteorological term. And I looked to try to find a succinct scientific explanation. Couldn't find one. But what it basically means in layman terms is that in Seattle, Washington tomorrow, it is going to be exceptionally rainy and exceptionally windy. Now, I know it rains in Seattle all the time, but it's basically supposed to be very rainy all day in Seattle, and the wind gusts up to 30 miles per hour or higher. So give me the under in Oregon State, Washington, under 54.5. Washington's offense, they can run the ball, but like they're a team that wants to throw. And if it's windy and gross, throwing the ball is going to be very difficult. So give me the under there. And then here's the one that I think I'm going to convince Matt to take along with me. I might convince both of you. What is the most reliable bet in college football?
I don't know.
Iowa under.
Academy head-to-head unders.
Yep, I'm in.
And for the last 52 games head-to-head between Service Academy teams, the under is 42, 9, and 1. Army and Air Force play the total. The number for the total starts with a 4. It ends with a 0. So it's 40. I don't care what it says.
Add it to my card.
I'm not going to disrespect the troops. And you can say, well, by saying that's going to go under, aren't you disrespecting the troops? No. Why?
You're saying they have play great defense.
It is our national defense, and I'm not going to disrespect our national defense by thinking these teams are going to score. Army, Air Force, under 40. So there you go. Georgia -8, Auburn +13, Kansas State +2.5, Army, Air Force, under 40, Oregon State, Washington, under 54.5. And then if Todd Centeio plays James Madison, +7.5. I have a 6.5-point teaser also on the card. If you had said before the season Duke was going to be a 9.5-point favorite on the road against somebody, you would have said, why hasn't Georgia Tech fired Jeff Collins yet? But nevertheless, they are in Boston, taking on a Boston College team on a short week because they have 1 day fewer rest. The entire team is hurt, including Phil Jurkovec, who hasn't practiced yet this week, and Duke is coming off a bye week. You probably should just lay the 9.5, but I'm a chicken shit, so I'm going to tease that down to 3. And then Boise State at home against BYU. Boise State's offense has actually been functional since they fired their offensive coordinator and Hank Bachmeier entered the transfer portal. Not great. Kind of like Illinois, if they don't turn the ball over in the passing game, they're just going to run the ball and play great defense. BYU trending in the wrong direction there. That one was, I got that at 1.5 in the teaser. So Duke -3, Boise State -1.5, a 6.5-point teaser there. And then I was bored yesterday, so I put together an exceptionally stupid money line parlay, and I will explain why I did this at the end. TCU, North Carolina, Penn State at Indiana, Cincinnati against Navy, Michigan at Rutgers, Utah against Arizona, USC versus Cal, and then the final leg of this, Clemson at Notre Dame. Because here's the reason. I am going to be perfectly fine losing this bet if Notre Dame wins that game. Perfectly fine losing that bet if Notre Dame pulls off the upset. But now I have the hedge of Clemson winning this game straight up in the money line. They're like minus whatever. So basically, to me, this is what I'm pretty confident in is a +300 money line bet on Clemson to win a game that I want them to lose.
I like it.
Yeah, that's a pretty good. That's again.
I might add that to my card.
I can send you it in Slack if you want. I will send you each.
Please do. Let me take a look.
So there you go.
I might dabble in that one as well.
I might need to take a peek.
I'll send in the DMs right now while I'm copying and pasting over to the DMs. Let's talk a little prize picks. My legs have been great. I don't know. My betting's been shitty all year, but I feel like I'm on a pretty solid run with prize picks.
I've been pretty hit or miss. I've been about 50-50, I think, so far.
Notre Dame players.
Yeah, but like, I think I'm actually like 50-50 with my Notre Dame picks. Michael Mayer, you can get mad at me for some Notre Dame bets. You can never get mad at me for betting on Michael Mayer. I'll start. If I'm not the one who took a Notre Dame player this time, I'm going Jalen Hyatt over 78.5 receiving yards. He's gone over 102 of the last 3 in all 3. One of those games being a 200-yard game. And in the biggest games, he has been their best player, not named Hendon Hooker, maybe even their best player overall. So I'm banking on Jalen Hyatt running a seam route that a safety forgets to kind of lean over towards him on, and he makes a couple of those catches and then picks up some big gains. So Jalen Hyatt over 78.5 receiving yards.
Nice. I'll with again Notre Dame, but not what you think. Going Drew Pine under 170.5 yards. Last week he threw for 119 against Syracuse's defense. Again, I think Syracuse has probably a comparable, maybe even better secondary than Clemson. But with Notre Dame's want and need to run the ball, Tommy Rees's ability to not scheme things up downfield, Drew Pine's noodle arm, I think they're going to go short and intermediate if they're going to throw much at all. Pair that with a terrible weather situation for a quarterback with a not strong arm and a great D-line, I think that doesn't come anywhere close.
I'm not sure if you can see over the defensive line.
Can't, not even a little bit.
For mine, I'm going to go with Jaden Daniels over 255.5 passing plus rushing yards against Alabama. I mean, I know maybe his numbers have been inflated the last couple of weeks playing against defenses that aren't great, but until we see Alabama's defense play great on the road, a quarterback who can move with receivers who can get open against an Alabama secondary that's a little dicey, if they can keep Will Anderson off of him, I think they're going to move the ball. So Jaden Daniels over 255.5 passing plus rushing yards.
I love it. I already put it in. I will get that out onto the Twitter sphere and into the Discord, and look at us. We're right on an hour.
You try. I'm gonna pull back the curtain now. You tried to screw me last week because you didn't put it in on Thursday, and then Israel Abanikanda rushing yards went from like 100.5 to 120.5. Never in doubt.
Yeah,
never
so
even in doubt.
It was fine. It worked out.
They were just gonna run the ball. By the way, my last thing: did you see Pat Narduzzi once again complain this week about them not running the ball last year? I'm assuming he was talking about Israel Abanikanda having a breakout year this year, and he was talking about how they didn't run the ball last year.
I've muted Pat Narduzzi from my brain at this point. Not necessarily Twitter, but just my brain.
Anyway, maybe my least favorite coach other than Dabo. Man, the ACC has just some like super unlikable court.
Yeah, but then they got like, I love Mac Brown. They got Mac Brown.
I've got mixed feelings about Mac Brown.
I started to say that, and then I realized the Texas.
I was about to say, Matt, that's it. Yeah.
We've been going for an hour. I don't think you want me to go for another half an hour about my mixed feelings about Mac Brown.
Somehow mentioned, I think, the last 3 Texas coaches, though.
We did.
Mac Brown, Tom Herman,
I flipped Tom Herman in there. But I mean, it's the same fucking thing, just with a little bit better offense, I guess.
And that's where we probably say goodbye.
And on that note, man, Phil, it was so good to have you back. We've missed you. We hope the job's going well. We hope, juggling a new baby and a new job is keeping you on your toes. And hopefully you're upright most of the time, not just exhausted all the time. But we're glad that you're able to join us. We're hopefully going to be able to have you every week going forward. Matt, always a joy and pleasure talking to you. Everyone enjoy the football this weekend. Enjoy your bets. Hopefully your bets are winners, and we will be, hopefully your Tennessee bets are losers and my Georgia bet's a winner. But nevertheless, everyone out there, whatever you bet, we hope it's a winner, and we will be back to recap all of this on Tuesday. We will talk to you then.